Now we'll hop into question 2. How do I keep my emotions from working against me? So back to our nervous system, right? When we're thinking about our emotions, these are our amygdala. I want to talk about a little bit of like the amygdala being responsible for regulating our nervous system, our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses. And then the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that's responsible for emotional regulation, reasoning, planning, these sorts of things. And so we're kind of in a battle when we're talking about our emotions working against us. We're in a battle between these two parts of our brain, right? We might get a random text from, or a random Slack from like our boss. It's like, hey, are you free to meet this afternoon? And you're like, oh my God, I'm being laid off. And then the prefrontal cortex comes in. Okay, maybe that's happening. Or maybe we could just reply to this answer and say, sure, what do you want to talk about? And then we can freak out if it's a vague answer again or whatever. But those are kind of, it's an example of the way these two things work in your brain. And so the amygdala, in these things where we start feeling emotional, there's usually an underlying thing of like fear or uncertainty that's driving those. And I'll go into those in a little bit in a second. But the fight response, when that one comes in, this is going to be our inner critic, which we were just talking about a little bit. And then also on the 16th, come to that. It'll be fun. Okay. So the inner critic, it can give us an impulsive reaction, right? Like we can either sort of react to someone else and bite their head off or whatever the thing is, or maybe that's just me, but I'm super good at that. Or we start the inner critic and beating ourselves up. The freeze response, right? Where we might just feel like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do, right? There might be this panic thing when we're talking about emotions. And that's often like self-doubt. And think about when we are in a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, there's less blood in our brain. So in those moments where you feel like really overwhelmed and, oh my God, how am I gonna answer this question, or I'm on the spot, or they think I'm an idiot, or whatever is going on, right? That's creating those self-doubt. There's less blood in the brain. So it is true that it's going to be harder to come up with something on the spot, like once you're flooded with the adrenaline and cortisol. But I'm going to give you a couple of tips for that towards the end. Or we could go into a fawn response where we just start people pleasing, right? We're just like, everyone else's comfort is so much more important than my own. And if they're comfortable, then I can be happy and safe. Or we go into a flight response where we're either avoiding, right? We just take off and I'm not even going to be a part of this, or we shut down. And this is a little bit what I was talking about in the last one. We can start doing something else, a concept we call in thought work buffering, where we're trying to avoid the uncomfortable emotion. So we just go, it could be anything from like streaming social media to cleaning your house, right? The concept is just we're trying to avoid one emotion, so we're going to go do some other things because we think that fixes it. Okay, the socialization. This is where it gets really deep. And I also get like slightly angry when I talk about this. So if I sound slightly angry, it's just that I'm really passionate about this. Emotions in women's are pathologized, right? We're told we're hysterical or unstable rather than our emotions being a legitimate response to an injustice or to oppression or to someone doing something that by definition would hurt most people's feelings. And so we get told that we're irrational, that we're overly emotional, and then add in the thing, right? It's further pathologized by additional marginalized identities that you live within. Bye, hell. I'll see you soon. Okay. So now think about how this will impact with additional marginalized identities, right? We've got the angry Black woman, the fiery Latina, the submissive Asian woman, the hypersexualized gay man, right? All of these things that come in the way that we label in a patriarchal society, the way that we label specific identities for having very legitimate emotional responses to the situation. What happens is we're afraid of being wrong or being criticized because we don't get that validation that we're looking for from other people that we're doing it right, right? And so we don't get our validation cookies, or we're afraid of being unliked. And finally, there's like a bit of the emotional labor that often falls to people socialized as women, right? That where we're taught that we're responsible for other people's comfort and that we're supposed to be empathetic and accommodating. So all of these are like the different ways that we are socialized to what's an acceptable emotion and what's an unacceptable emotion, right? Crying with women is much more acceptable than anger. and vice versa for men in a patriarchal society, right? Where anger is much more acceptable than crying, although they come from the exact same place, right? And they're all valid feelings. When we're talking about the feelings, there's sort of like two layers to this, right? There's the fear and uncertainty that are driven by the internal dialogue, right? Whatever's going on in that moment that's triggering your nervous system is an internal dialogue thing. Someone says something and you think, they think I have no idea what I'm doing, right? Or I don't know the answer to that. I'm an idiot, right? Or I can't believe they said that. They don't love me, right? It's driven by an internal dialogue. There's a different like thing that's going on where it's driving you into this, where we're adding meaning on top of whatever else is going on outside of us. The meaning that we're adding it is driving a layer of emotion that's creating our response that we're worried about regulating in that moment. So those thoughts raise the stakes on whatever's going on. So someone says something really shitty, you have an emotional reaction to it. But the thoughts that you're having, I'm doing it wrong, they're not listening, this is never going to work out, I always fuck this up, I don't know what to do, they're mad at me, right? Those are the thoughts that raise the stakes on whatever else is going on and are often the thing that sort of push the emotional reaction to be an external sort of thing, maybe when we don't want it to be, maybe when we would rather deal with that feeling later by ourselves alone. Okay. Here's what's happening with the behavior, right? Like, of course, we judge our emotions. They're natural human, even though they're natural human responses, we have all of these tropes working against us, right? We don't want to be labeled hysterical. Of course, we try to overregulate our own feelings because we feel responsible for other people's comfort. Hopefully, you can't hear that banging. There's like construction going on upstairs. It's really fun. Thankfully, the dog stopped barking about it. She was really upset about it for a little while, but she seems to be over it. All right. And of course, we devalue our emotions. We don't get our validation cookies for being honest. All right. So, what are the outcomes that happen with this? Well, we shove down our feelings until they finally boil over and sometimes feel like an overreaction to maybe an inconsequential issue, right? We lash out, we shut down, and then we shame ourselves for our reaction. And then we start telling ourselves stories on top of that, right? We raise the stakes of like stories where like, oh, now they're never going to help me work on a project again, or my team's never going to respect me if they see that I get upset about these certain things, like whatever the story is. Rebecca said, "Ooh, yeah, that cycle is real." Yes, yes, absolutely. Oh, thanks, Anne. You can't hear it. That's good. I can. I kind of want to go pound back, but my ceilings are much too high for that. Or we apologize for our feelings and then shame ourselves for having caused discomfort. So we're going to go and tell people, this is where we go into people pleasing mode, right? Of we're just going to react like, oh, me being honest made you uncomfortable. And now I feel bad about your discomfort. So I'm going to go in and try to fix that. That banging is amazing. All right. So the tips to try here. If you're in a room with other people, and I know sometimes like I used to really worry about taking a deep breath, even though that would be the thing that I really needed because I felt like that was going to show my emotion. But you can do more subtle things like feeling your body in the room. So you can be like, how do my feet feel on the floor or in my shoes? How does my body feel against the chair? How do my fingers feel, right? Like on the desk or the table or on my lap. But you can get back in your body, and that's really going to lower the response with your nervous system, right? Because we want to get the blood back into your brain. We want to lower the adrenaline and cortisol because everything that comes after that, the crying, the lashing out, the shutting down, whatever it is, whatever the emotional reaction is that's going to come, that again is a very valid response probably to whatever's going on. But if you want to have a little bit more control in the moment, this is a way to really subtly get back into your body. And you can definitely do it if you're just trying to hold your face on a Zoom call, right? Like, how do my fingers feel on my keyboard right now? Like, how does my feet feel in my slippers instead of my shoes, right? Like whatever's going on. But there are ways that you can just feel more subtle. And then if you have a minute, if you can go off camera, if whatever else is going on, if you can remind yourself that what I was saying before, I am safe or you are safe, right? But like for me, especially like if you need to do it where you can't see, put your hand on your body somewhere and just tell yourself that I am safe or you are safe, whichever one works for you. And then later, when you really want to get through this emotion, because we can't just remove the stressor the thing that's causing it, right? We think, oh, I got off that call, I didn't cry, I'm good. You want to come back to that feeling because, and you want to do the thing that we're talking about that Ashley was saying, you want to have that voice in your head, but you want to just think about this part of you that's freaking out inside is that same like toddler energy. Like that doesn't change. We just get better at masking it, but we still have those same kind of reactions. And you just want to like think about talking to yourself like you were a little kid and like, how does it make total sense that you feel this way? Of course you feel this way, right? And you can really talk yourself down of, you know, of course you feel hurt and angry. She just told you she shouldn't have to babysit you. Of course you feel that way. It makes total sense. Who wouldn't feel that way? And you can really validate yourself there. And then the last little tip for emotional regulation is, especially when you're like very like big emotion reaction, is you can just do a body scan. Because sometimes like I, you know, even though I do this work all the time, sometimes I can't name the emotion. And so sometimes I'll just spend some time being like, I feel it in my throat. It feels tight. And I give it a color saying like, oh, this, you know, if I'm thinking about this feeling, it's like a gunmetal gray. It's kind of smooth and shiny and hard, right? But you want to describe the feeling in your body, right? Oh, I also feel a tingling in my fingers, but this will really get you into your body. Oh. And said, Gretchen in my ear is a game changer. This was great. Have a great day. Yes. Okay, great. But these are the different ways of like really like process working your way through the emotion in the moment, but then processing the feelings later. But don't think that just because you don't feel like crying right now, that that whole thing is gone. It's not. It's just there. And it's going to keep coming back up, especially if it was something really hurtful or really frustrating. And so you're going to want to process your way through that and really validate yourself.